This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. So, one of the benefits of meditation life is the paradigm shift. It's something we don't often talk about, how everything knits together, how everything comes together. But it's a lot of the time that we need to look at the bigger picture as well as the mechanics of how everything works. Because the difficulty is that when we don't look at how everything fits together, we don't really know the direction that we need to be moving in or where this leads to. It becomes just a lifestyle or just a thing that we do, sometimes with the hope that it's going to fix all our problems, without understanding how the problems came to be in the first place. And so it's always this difficult balance in practicing as well as teaching, as well as finding resources about Buddhist practice, because there's just so much written and so much out there, but at the same time so little clarity in exactly which direction we have to go to. But the essence of it is always very, very similar. And the important thing is recognizing where we've come from. To look back where we were 5 days ago, 5 weeks ago, 5 years, and so on. A larger scale of time to see how we've developed, how we've grown as human beings, how this has helped us, how we've made mistakes and everything else, and that's fine, that's human. But how we've learned from those, how we've developed from those, that's the joy of the practice. Because one of the fundamental problems is, deep, deep down, we see in the world all around us the change, the chaos, the uncertainty, the unreliability of life, of all the things around us, how everything is sometimes not working out as we hoped, and sometimes absolutely going in a complete opposite direction of what we wanted. And all these different things and all the pain and misery and loss and disappointments in life. The problem is, deep, deep down, we see this all the time. And yes, we get burnt out from it. But we're also afraid of it. And we block it out. We build up those firewalls. We build up our fortress. Sometimes we build a castle in the sky to escape to. Or a nice little cozy home where you can feel safe and secure. And all these things, in order to cope, in order to deal with life. And that's fine. We do this because we don't know better. We don't know any other ways of dealing with all this stuff, which is around us all the time. But this is where it gets interesting. Because we know this deep, deep down, in many ways it's more accessible than we realize. This thing that we're working towards, this freedom from suffering, the happiness, the joy, developing all these beautiful qualities, they're far more accessible than we often realize. But in order to do that, we need a bit of a paradigm shift. Because we have this security issue, we build up this world so we feel safe, so we feel in control, so we feel that we can cope, that we can manage life. And so for that becomes a huge vested interest to not change that. But that can become a prison. That can become miserable. It can become, in many cases, even self-sabotaging our own happiness because we don't want to take the risk. We don't want to gamble what we've built up. And we don't want to look at the unpleasantness that objectively we experience all the time. And this is where it starts to come together. This paradigm shift is very, very gentle in Buddhism. We start developing all these different qualities. Some of these things, it usually starts off with generosity in the 5 precepts and things like that. But these are things that are quite difficult to talk about because when we start to talk about generosity, most people instantly, the back of their mind, start to think, oh, he's fishing for donations, there's an agenda behind this, all these things that kind of hinder us in being able to talk about it. And yet, oddly enough, when we look during the early texts, when the Buddha was around, these discourses, most of the questions people were asking were about generosity and 5 precepts and things like that. And it's really hard to find out why they were asking that question. But it was a cultural thing. They had already had an idea of karma before the Buddha. They already had an idea of all these things, and they were trying to work out, what does generosity mean? How to do it right? Because for them, that was part of the culture. He was already saying, we're supposed to do this, fine, but what is the way that we're supposed to do this? Later on, after the Buddha died, things changed. And it became a bit of a taboo to talk about these things. Most people had a bit of pushback, sort of saying, don't we know how to give a gift? Well, it turns out, not really. A lot of the things we do, we don't really understand what we're doing or why we're doing it. And all of a sudden, that gives a huge canvas, a great opportunity for us to explore and find out about this. How do we live our lives? How do we improve our lives? We have this vested interest to feel safe and secure, to feel in our little fortress. That's fine. We built that up to feel safe. It's there for a reason. And yet the fact that we're not going to gamble it is also interesting because it tells us we know it can be worse. In other words, we know quite a bit about the First Noble Truth, but we don't really want to recognize that we know it. This is a very, very interesting bit of psychology. The deeper and deeper we look at it, the more we realize there's this conflict of interest, that we don't want to gamble our sense of security, this world that we built up, even though it's making us so miserable. We don't know enough to gamble it, to see something else, an alternative. And that's where the Buddhist practice comes in. We start off very gently, little baby steps, keeping the 5 precepts. What kind of change does it make in your life? Being kind, being generous, trying all these things. What does it feel like? All of a sudden, it's feeling like we're stepping a little bit out of the fortress. Not too much, it's okay, just a little bit. And wow, the sky doesn't collapse when we do this. And we start to feel a bit more confident that maybe this is okay. Maybe we can do this. Maybe we can improve our lives. And the more and more we do this, the more and more we realize, actually, it's not so scary. It's not so scary to do all these positive qualities, these positive things in the world, in our lives, in our family, in our workplace, and everything else. Because, of course, we sabotage ourselves because we don't want to take this risk. We're still not sure about what we're doing. And this paradigm shift that we have to take comes from the meditation, comes from the mindfulness, comes from the everyday life practice. Taking the opportunity to do good things, taking the opportunity to try new things, to explore a bit, to not be afraid of making mistakes, because we've all made mistakes. If you're a monastic, you make lots of mistakes. It's part of the practice. And to be able to enjoy making mistakes is the thing, because that's when you find out whether this stuff works. And more, we start to experience, looking back, where we've come from, trapped in our fortress, afraid of what's going on, careful what we say, what we do and everything else, only because we're afraid of making things worse, afraid of the consequences, afraid that we're going to experience more suffering than what we've already got. And yet, we realize that all of a sudden, these practices are an act of self-respect. They're very calming, they're very soothing, they're enriching, they're fulfilling. They give meaning to life, they give enjoyment to life, and they ease a lot of the other problems. Part of the reason it's so difficult for us to let go of stuff is because we don't want to take the risk. This stuff, this trauma, this pain, these miseries, these disappointments, these frustrations, these resentments, this bitterness, this self-hate that's so endemic in the world. These are things that we don't want to risk. It seems really, really bizarre when we look at it. We're stuck being depressed and disappointed and frustrated and everything else, but we don't want to gamble that. We prefer to stick in that environment than having something better. Yes, we do. We do want to have those things because we don't know better. We haven't explored and experimented a little bit to see what difference it can make. And that's always the joy of the practice, is seeing these little differences, seeing how much more free we've become, how much more at ease we are with ourselves, how much more we can enjoy everything. But it happens in stages. There's a lot of reflection going on as well, because a lot of the times at the beginning, we need to put a positive spin on things. We need to put a bit of inspiration, a bit of energy and enjoyment into it. But sooner or later, it dawns on us that this positive spin is just more spin. It's not real. It's still a story. And we can start to explore that. Can we be more happy as we are? Can we be more happy with our follies, with our faults, with our mistakes, with all the stuff that drives us crazy? Can we be happy and content with that? And this is where it starts to get more deeper in a way, because we really start to be more at ease with what life throws at us. They're not so frightening anymore. There's still going to be lots of challenges. They're not going to go away. We can't change that. But it's how we deal with that is really the crux of the issue. But when we're stuck in our fortress, we've got our fight or flight response going. We've got our firewalls up. There's no way that we're going to be able to deal with things in an easier way. We're already going to have those vested interests, those fears, those concerns. They're going to be riding all the time because they're so built in. They're not just baked on, they're baked in. Big difference. And that's the issue. But at the same time, with the meditation practice, we calm things down. We fill our life with more enjoyable experiences, more richer experiences, quality experiences that are built out of the generosity, the 5 precepts, doing good, doing kindness, being more forgiving to ourselves, not taking things so seriously. That starts to make more space. We can breathe again. We can enjoy things. We're going, oh, it's okay. It's not so bad. We feel more confident to be able to take bigger steps, more under the open sky, more enjoyment of life. Because the reason we can't let go is because we're trapped in the status quo. We're trapped in a world that we have built up, that we're not afraid to take. We are afraid essentially to take the risk, but there's just no hope in this picture of us developing anything better. And yet there is. But we're really when we look at it from here to here, that seems a huge step. It seems too much to go from being the status quo to being a happy, free person. It seems too hard, too alien to us, too foreign, too distant. But it's not necessarily so. That's why it's always a gentle process. Taking those little baby steps, exploring a little bit, seeing this isn't so scary. Let's do a little bit more. Let's try a little bit more. Let's try new things. It's a lot like cooking in the kitchen. To begin with, everybody starts with a very, very simple recipe. We're still, not sure how this is going to work. This might be a little bit scary. And we tried and, a couple of months later, it's like, that's so easy, It's basic. We can do that with our eyes closed. No problem. And we can take on bigger challenges, more complex recipes, more challenging things. And we enjoy it. Even if it doesn't work out, who cares? We gave it a shot. We put our integrity into it. We gave it our best effort. That's what matters. And we can still say, okay, so this was wrong and this was wrong. The bulk of it was right, but, we'll just improve these little bits next time. More opportunities are there to discover how we can improve things until we can really start to enjoy what we do in life. We can enjoy life itself. Yes, it's still going to be impermanent. It's still going to be chaotic and unreliable and everything else, the whole package of everything we've been trying to get away from. But by developing this better confidence in ourselves, this self-respect, this paradigm shift, all of a sudden we're happier with things just as they are. We don't have to be afraid that things are going to change tomorrow, because they're always going to change tomorrow. That's okay. We don't have to be running all the time. We don't have to be afraid of our physical sensations, our mental stuff, all the emotions that come up, all the thoughts and ideas that drive us crazy or make us wonder if we are crazy. We don't have to worry about those things. They're just passing phenomena. It's just stuff that comes in, stuff that goes. Nothing to do with us. It's not a thing that we have to be too concerned about. And that's where the liberation and the freedom comes from. That we don't have to punish ourselves for being imperfect. We don't have to punish ourselves for being human. We look around in the world today, the amount of self-hate that perpetuates in the world today is huge. The problems with particularly male mental health is huge, and very little is being done about it. And then we're wondering why there's so much male violence and so many other problems in the world. This stuff doesn't exist in isolation. It's based on cause and effect. There are causes for it, and we can look at those, and we can see them in ourselves. Are these problems within us? And what can we do about them? Because the moment we can see that they are in ourselves, the greed, the hatred, the delusion, the bitterness, the resentment, the frustrations, the disappointments, all the stuff, we all have them. They're all part of being human. However, also being human is a chance of being free of them. Also being human is being able to choose better, wiser, in a meaningful way. And that's a choice that takes a while for us to take, because remember, at the beginning we see all this chaos and everything else, and we go, oh no, back off, don't want this, keep it out, go away, how can I get away from this? All the fight and flight response, everything else. How do we keep this away is our primary agenda. How do we control the world is our goal, so we don't have to face what's inside of us. And that is really the model that most of us, at the beginning, the model that most of us operate from. And that's where we all have to start from, is facing our challenges. And sort of as we do so, based on a foundation built on our generosity, on our kindness, on all our stuff, our integrity, that we gave it our best shot, that we put effort into things, that we tried things, that we lived life well, we took the opportunity, That foundation becomes very, very important, because this is the thing. In Buddhism, we talk about emptiness as this wonderfully profound thing, and we like to talk about its deep and meaningful stuff. But when it comes to psychological or emotional emptiness, well, that scares a lot of people. Most people, they don't want to go there. The emptiness is a thing that they're trying to get away from. And yet coming more to terms with what life is and realizing that it's not so scary. It's always been this way. And that's all right. All of a sudden, with this foundation we've built out of our goodness and our happiness, we feel more able to face life and to do something good with it and to take the opportunity. Because this is the problem. When we have this fortress that we've built up, we haven't taken this paradigm shift or seen bigger. We're at the mercy of peer pressure. We're at the mercy of the environment. We're at the mercy of everything else, that we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to gamble the status quo because it's so important to us. The status quo makes us feel safe. This is what we've built up, able to cope, able to deal with the world. It's not the best thing in the world, fine, but it works. That's good enough for us. It takes a while for us to realize that, yeah, okay, it works and everything else, but actually it doesn't really work because it sucks. You know, if everything was all happy and we had found the solution, none of us would be here tonight, would we? None of us would be interested in talking about Buddhism and meditation if we could just snap our fingers and, you know, if the status quo was already working, we wouldn't need to talk about this. And that's where it gets interesting. The fact that we're here is because we recognize it's not working. It can't be it. It can't be all there is, because it leaves us feeling hollow. It feels us leaving empty. It leaves us feeling vulnerable and at the mercy of everything else that is making life so hard. But with the practice, taking these baby steps initially, starting with it simply, we can see the difference it makes. Culturally, though, this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky. Because if you've been brought up as a Buddhist, all this stuff doesn't really seem that special. All this stuff's like, yeah, kindness, compassion, blah, 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 whatever. When you're coming into Buddhism, or you've been in an environment where there isn't a lot of compassion, there isn't a lot of kindness, there isn't a lot of, life is tough, when you're coming from that background, all of a sudden this stuff seems really new and interesting and wow, this is great, this is meaningful. So there's a little bit of this cultural problem in the background that can hinder us. And sometimes it can be harder for a cultural Buddhist, as in someone who's been brought up in a Buddhist environment, to practice Buddhism, because for them it just doesn't seem anything special. They're more interested in running off to more exotic things, you could say, which, coming from the Western world, we realize that it doesn't fix the problem either, but it's very attractive to different cultures and everything else. And that's the thing, a lot of Westerners are attracted to the exoticness of Buddhism and the Eastern world and everything else. And we're both trying to come from our different directions, trying to come towards the same thing. And of course, this is where it gets interesting, because we all have so many ideas, but so few of us have any happiness in it. So few of us have any peace and contentment and just ease of life, being okay with the stuff that happens, which was stuff we can't control anyway. And that's okay. We all have to start somewhere. We all have to recognize where we're coming from. And for me, this has always been a very, very important thing. To really be in the present moment, we have to recognize where we've come from, how we've arrived at this present moment. We're already here. How did we get here, though? We have to understand where we've come from in order to understand where we can go to. Because we have to deal with the stuff that we've already got before we can move forward. This is why there's no fixed recipe, so to speak. It's always a matter of adjusting little bits here, turning up a dial here, turning it down there. Always these little things that need adjusting that's different for each person. And initially, for most people, they kind of need a good friend, a Dhamma practitioner, a teacher, someone else who's already done it and can see the little tweaks and little things going, oh, well, this needs improving, this needs toning down, areas that we can work on, person to person. Later on, though, once you've already started to realize your own experiences, in other words, you started to be mindful of the experience itself, without being afraid of the physical feelings, the psychological thoughts and feelings and everything else, without being afraid of basically who we are, our own personal world. Without being afraid of that, all of a sudden we can manage this on our own. We become independent more. There's this very, very important term in Buddhism, aparapachaya, not dependent on others to be able to practice, because you've already built up a beautiful foundation, that you feel firm under your feet, that you feel strong, that empowers you, and that enriches you as well, because it's a tool that you feel, you don't feel like you're going to be blown away in the next wind, which many of us do. But when we have that, it's a solidity, it's a refuge, which is the other thing the Buddha talks about, being your own refuge. That's what it's all about. There's this difference between earlier Buddhism and later Buddhism, based on a certain word, dipa. It means be your own island. In later traditions, they translate it as be your own light. Both are beautiful. The former is probably correct because the full metaphor is be your own island of which no flood will wash over. It could still work with light. If be your own light works for you, fantastic. Use that. But, be your own island as well. You have to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be able to take the risk of happiness, the risk of freedom, the risk of living a better life. And the thing is, which is really remarkable, is that when you start to do it, other people feel that they can do it too. They can see that you're happier, more confident, more at ease with yourself. And in many ways, they'll be drawn to you for the sense that they feel that you've got something that they're lacking. And just by being there, showing them how it works, you can help them too. And that's one of the amazing things about it. How does all this work? How does all this come together? Oh. We can help each other by living a good life. It sounds remarkable, but it's not really until we start experimenting with this and seeing it for ourselves that we realize how much living a good life helps ourselves and helps others. So I've been going on for half an hour. Shall we jump into the meditation?
Yes, indeed. Be great.
All right, so as usual, everybody please stand up, give yourself a bit of a stretch, adjust all your clothes and do all the things you need to do. Which for me includes this robe. I finally changed it the other day. I've had a robe since I ordained as a novice and finally got a new one, so still getting used to it. It's falling off all the time. Okay, so when we're ready to go, please settle into your seats and make yourself comfortable. And we'll start by closing your eyes. And what does it feel like just to close your eyes? Just to let the visual world fade away for a little bit. Does it feel, bit of a break, bit of a rest? How does it feel for you? Try to look inside, how it feels physically as well as mentally, to relax and to settle into the chair or onto your cushion. Sometimes we need to give an affirmation to ourselves of the relaxing, of the comfort, of the relief, and that it's okay. This is the time for it. Because when we can give it permission, we can allow it to grow. And for the first few minutes, it's perfectly all right to adjust your posture as you need to, because as you relax, your joints will change shape. And this helps the relaxing more. And settle in on your breathing and use the breathing to help the relaxing. If you need to use words or a mantra, go for it. Use what helps. Use what works. And if you can, smile with the relaxing. It gives positive feedback. If thoughts and feelings pop up in your head and distractions arise, that's okay. Don't be afraid to say hello to them. They're messengers. The only reason that these things arise is because we're not comfortable yet. There's still something we can work on. As you breathe in, encourage and investigate a sense of confidence, a self-respect, and enjoyment. Use the moment to allow those things to grow. To find your way home. And now imagine any time in your life that you've been happy, that you've had delight and joy. Any meaningful moment. And allow that feeling to come present again. And allow that joy, that happiness to expand, to include everyone you love. That they too may experience that happiness. That they too can have a life filled with meaning. And allow it to expand further as you can take it, as far as it will go. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So, welcome back.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you. Most lovely meditation. How would you like to proceed, Venerable? Would you like to...
Questions?
Questions? Okay, is there anybody who would like to unmute or to leave a question in the chat that I can read for you?
Can I ask?
Of course you can, Gloria. Please.
You mentioned in the talk like the lightheartedness and like being free, and I'm thinking about like responsibility recently.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a person with very strong sense of responsibility. I feel like I'm a little bit like more extreme than normal people. Like my view of responsibility is quite constricted and like quite tight, I would say. Like, and I have a hard time, like, I will feel frustrated and irritated when I saw people like is irresponsible. And I know that they may not like, I don't want to judge them, like I don't really want to criticize them, but I just have this feeling of like irritation immediately come up when I saw like some people being irresponsible. And I do find that like this sense of this sense of like responsibility is bringing me a little bit of suffering and like unhappiness in general. But I also feel like the Buddha abandoned his family to a certain extent, and then I'm like, is like responsibility not important in Buddhism? And then I think about it, and I also feel like it is not really right. I don't know whether right or wrong is like important, but I'm like, so where is the middle way? The middle way of like you're not totally irresponsible, you're responsible, but like hardness. And yes, I would like to ask like the role of like responsibility in like your Buddhist practice, and how to like loosen up your will on that a bit.
It's a tricky one, because responsibility at the beginning is important, because it gives us a sense of stability. And a lot of times, it's imposed on us. We're told to be responsible and everything else. But because of the nature of cause and effect, we have to be responsible in the sense that there are some causes that are just going to make us suffer more. There are some causes that are just going to make us miserable and frustrated and disappointed. And looking at those causes is the important part, because that's actually where we recognize where this comes from. Sometimes when we look at other people who are mindless, self-centered, doing whatever they want, and it instantly frustrates us, and the rage comes out. But what is that reflecting? Is that not reflecting our internal frustrations? That we weren't able to get our own lives in control and everything else. We weren't able to get things perfect. And so other people just going off doing whatever they want, in a sense, unsettles our own mind. This can be a reflection of the outside world is targeting something inside of us. And that's really great for Buddhist practice, right? Because that's where we got to work. But a lot of the time, it also comes from having so many disappointments, having so many frustrations, banging our head against that wall so many times that we realize it just is not working. And that's when we start to really change the sense of going, okay, we gave it our best shot. We put effort into it, and that means something. We gave it a best shot. It didn't work out. Too much responsibility has become too much of a burden, too much of a prison. From this position where we have reached that point, we can start to let go a little bit more. We can start to ease off a little bit. It doesn't happen from the beginning. It comes from reflecting all these times that we've tried to be responsible, we've tried to be good people, we've tried to make the world a better place, and we've put all this effort and energy and time and sacrifice into doing that. And there's all these other people doing whatever they want and seem to have a fine time of it, and part of us gets frustrated at that. It starts to conflict with us inside, doesn't it? Right? So starting to get to that point that we realize that actually we have done good in our own lives. We've made an effort to do good and be responsible. But that's our own internal business. It's not playing out so much in the world. We don't have to worry so much about that. Other people are making their decisions that we are not responsible for. That takes a while to get. That's a big one to come to terms with. Our responsibility for other people's choices is not that big. We have to allow them to live their lives, even when they're being foolish and self-centered and self-sabotaging and doing all these things that's only going to make it worse for them. We have to allow them to be adults and to face the consequences of their actions, even if they ignore them. We can't escape from it. And this is where this bigger picture of Buddhism comes in, that we realize what karma is, that we are responsible for our own actions. But at the same time, that lightheartedness comes in by recognizing that it's okay. Everything in the universe is in an enclosed space. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just stuff arising, passing away. Nothing is created, nothing is destroyed ultimately. It's just change. And that's okay. From building that confidence within ourselves, we can be more at ease that we gave it our best shot and it didn't work. And it's not our failing that it didn't work. And that's okay. So I hope this helps, but this is a big conversation. And this takes a lot of time. But a lot of the thing of looking, giving ourselves a bit of a pat on the back that, yeah, we put effort into being responsible. And that's okay. But at the same time, it's gone a little bit too far. And to see how it's gone a little bit too far, and we can recognize that and going, okay, let's ease up, let's relax a little bit more. Let's give ourselves a little bit more quality time, a little bit more kindness for ourselves a bit. And then when we see other people, we've got our own crazinesses and eccentricities and our own failings, and other people have that too. And that's okay. That's what it is to be human. And it's to be able to accept other people as human, is to be able to accept ourselves as human. So I hope that helps.
When you say that, I feel really uncomfortable.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one more. Sorry, just one more.
No, okay.
How does if I forgive the person, but that person do not own up to his mistake, is my forgiveness to a certain extent take away his responsibility?
No, not at all. Because ultimately, that's the world they're making for it. They've got to live with their decisions. If you've given them forgiveness, if you've had that maturity and strength and, good-heartedness to forgive them for their bad behavior of whatever kind it may be, that's your quality. That's good for, that's your inner strength. And it's their weakness, so to speak, that they've ignored it. Their ignorance has overpowered them, that they can't see the quality gift of what forgiveness is. And that inside them creates pain. And they have to live with that. But that plants a seed in them for the future, that more and more they realize what that gift was and how they didn't see it. So it's not in any way losing, alleviating them of their responsibility. They won't be able to escape from it. All they're doing is just covering it up and pretending that, oh, it's not my business, I don't have to worry, la 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 la. They're just blocking out their own internal world, but they won't be able to escape from it. And that's the thing. So that's where the compassion comes in. The compassion for ourselves and for that person, that they're making a horrible world for themselves to live in. And that's what they have to live in until they see a different way of doing it. So, hope that makes you feel a bit more comfortable.
Yes, thank you so much.
And thank you, Gloria. Venerable, I'll ask Steve if you would like to ask you another question. Steve, would you like to unmute in Tasmania?
Yes,
Sorry.
thank you.
You're most welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Venerable. I just wanted to ask, my heartbeat, particularly of late, has become very obvious in my meditation, and it stays there. Can you shed some light on that, perhaps?
Okay. Is it uncomfortable?
It can be. Sometimes it's a bang, sometimes it's far more gentle.
Okay. It can be posture related. If we start to collapse a bit too much, it can compress the heart, and that forces the heart to work harder to pump the blood, and we can feel that in our head and in our body. So sometimes adjusting the posture can help a lot with that. If, however, you're very, very comfortable and all of a sudden you're becoming aware of your heartbeat, then that's something else. It's because your mind is looking for an object and it's moving on to a very subtle one, internal one. It's moved off your breathing onto your heartbeat. And if, so to speak, it's not something you expected or wanted, you can start to feel uncomfortable, you want it to go away, you'd rather focus on breathing or something else that's a distraction for you. And if you have sort of a negative reaction to that, then it can become more uncomfortable. So it can be a mix of both, but it is a bit of a trial and error approach on this one, is that it's not a bad thing, it's not a problem, but it's something that can come in and, you know, it can be used. You can develop practices with it, such as focusing on the heart as an object itself. So sending loving kindness through the heart, imagining your heart filling you with loving kindness and relaxation and all these wonderful qualities, as if the heart is pumping it through you. And all of a sudden that can ease it down a bit. But it can also, in rare cases, it can also be a sign that your heart is tired and it's not so healthy physically. And it could be sending you a message.
It's not a concern.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's not a concern. Yeah, I'm confident of that. And I do get that sense of a flow from it. And when it as I relax, it moves from the thump to the more gentle squeeze. And when that happens, it's okay.
oh, good.
But so it's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The good thing about this is that you can use it as a positive feedback. So when you're aware of this relaxation, it's like your heart is sending you a positive message. I'm relaxing more now. And you can feel at ease that you're relaxing more, and you can encourage it more. So that could work too.
Right. Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Venerable, and thank you, Steve. Venerable, I have one I'd like to read you from the chat. Would that be okay?
Of course.
May I ask that what is the best way to let the ego go? The I feel is so annoying.
You're very, very lucky to have that feeling. To recognize this I, this me, this mind, this little self-centeredness is unpleasant, is fantastic for the practice, because that's a great foundation. Because all of a sudden you can see, oh, hang on, I've been investing in this I, this me, this mind, building it up to feel more secure and confident, and now I can feel internally it didn't work, that it sucks, it's not pleasant. All of a sudden we can see, let's choose something else. And a lot of the time, it's choosing something that will balance and soften that ego. Sometimes it's that sense of kindness and compassion. Sometimes it's a sense of giving and generosity and spaciousness, not feeling so constricted. Because what is the particular I or me comes in many flavors, you could say. And it's working out the flavor in particular to you at that moment. How does it feel specifically? What is it kind of signaling towards you? And that's exactly what you can work on. Sometimes that I and me can be out of resentment or frustration or bitterness or disappointment or depression or fear or anxiety, all these different emotions. Or just that desire, this wanting, this need, this ambition, this agenda, the vested interests, and etc., etc., etc. Lots of different flavors. So it's particularly finding that is what's going to be really, really helpful, because then you can start to soften it. You can find an antidote to it, that the opposite of hate is the kindness. The opposite of tightness is relaxing. The opposite of depression is looking for the joy, the gratitude, all these wonderful qualities that is within all of us. We don't need to look outside for these beautiful qualities. They're already there. We just haven't found them yet. But recognizing this I and me is just a fundamentally unpleasant experience, that's fantastic. You should be thrilled. Lots of people don't have that.
The another way is the meditation. During the meditation, so much ego pull up itself. oh, I want to do that one, I want to achieve this one, I want to achieve that one. Another daily life is sometimes always thinking that I, me, myself feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. If go away, no, I, me, myself feeling, that would be wonderful. It's not so selfish.
Yeah. The fact that it comes up all the time and every day can also be a result of conditioning, that we were brought up to see the world in terms of I and me. And when you look at it, nearly all of us have that. We relate to the world in kind of me, mine, what I am, you, yours, what you are, us and them and theirs, ours, all these personal pronouns, so to speak, how we relate to the world. We've been conditioned to take them very, very strongly and very, very seriously. You know, we see in the world what happens if we get somebody's personal pronoun wrong. They get very, very upset. But the thing is, because we've been conditioned into taking them so seriously, we're primed to constantly be thinking of them. And constantly, they pop up all the time. And that's okay. That's where we start to get a bit more spaciousness in the everyday life, that we can relate to it a bit more differently. Reflect a bit more on anatta, for example, is to sort of see the non-self nature of things, the emptiness of things. And that can start to relieve it a bit. But it can also come, because desire can come out of greed, but it can also come out of fear and anxiety. It's finding the emotion, the need behind it, and working on that. So that's fantastic.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you so much for answering.
Yes, indeed, and thank you, Paula, for the question. Venerable, we have one more in the chat here. How should one handle disappointment in life and keep going and not give up?
Sometimes it's a matter of having been disappointed so many times that you're pretty much flat on the floor, that you realize that the only way that you're going to stand back up is to do it, is to pick yourself back up. Sometimes we need to get to that point when we realize how full of life, how many disappointments in life there can be. But we have to reflect back on our own goodness and our own happiness, and not taking these disappointments so seriously, not feeling so hurt by them. That takes time, but it's so important to be able to... disappointment as such, it pulls us down because we had hope. We had dreams of something better, something more wonderful, of better relationships, a better world, a better environment, better harmony between nations and all these wonderful things. And we just get disappointment because it's not happening. It's not matching up the beautiful dream. In other words, it's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. We've got so much hope that there is a pot of gold there, that it will all be okay. And it's just not happening. And we're seeing again and again and again, it's not happening. Sometimes we need to get to that point, that we realize that the only way that we can be free is to stand up again. One of the things I often tell junior monks is that being a monastic is like getting into the boxing ring with our defilements, getting into the boxing ring with Mara, and those defilements are going to kick our butt. They know our Achilles heel, they know all our weaknesses, so we have to learn how to dodge, we have to learn how to weave, we have to learn how to respond, and we have to learn how to take the punches. We have to learn how to get up again. And that's the inner strength. That's the endurance, the resilience that grows. And it's a sense to respect ourselves in the same moment. Yeah, this is tough. Life is hard. But we're giving it our best shot. That matters. That matters. So, again, it's a very big conversation, but I hope that helps, just that little part.
Thank you, Venerable. I'm sure that does help. It definitely helped me. So thank you. Good evening, Venerable. I have a question. This is a question that's in the chat. Whenever I begin to meditate, My throat tends to constrict. It's an uncomfortable sensation. Is this normal?
Oh, it can be. The thing is, we generally, because of this fear we have, so our response to the world is the fight or flight response. We've tried to tensen up. It can be in the throat, it can be in the chest, it can be in the arms, it can be in the hands, tightness, all sorts of things. It can be in the face, it can be anywhere. Specifically, it doesn't matter quite so much where it is, but it's a messenger. It doesn't exist in isolation. So the tightness in the throat is sort of saying, I'm afraid of something, I don't like this, I don't want to be here, something's wrong. It's to look at that message and ask it, why are we being tight? Why are we doing this? Sometimes it can be habit orientated. In other words, it happens automatically because it's been happening so long. And that's okay. Sometimes it's a message, and that's okay too. It's a message that, I just don't feel right to meditate at the moment, or I've got all this stuff I'm worried about, or I'm afraid of emptiness, I'm afraid of relaxing, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. It's finding the flavour, the message behind it that's important. And then we can focus on the particular area, because the reason the tightness stays is because we don't want it. It's become the enemy. The fight or flight response has taken over, and we want it to go away. We want to destroy it. We want to be happy and calm and, having blissful meditations and all this wonderful stuff that we read about. Which can be false advertising, quite honestly. But finding that resentment, that sort of aversion to it is very, very important, and we can relax that. And it's sending that message that it's okay to have tightness. It's okay for it to be there. And then we feel more at ease and it relaxes a little bit. The answer really comes from experimenting, seeing what you need and what works for you. So, hope that helps.
Thank you. We have another question here, if you'd like me to read that too, Venerable.
Yeah.
How should one approach mundane performativity in religious environments? What if, instead of leading to the diminishment of ego-centered behaviours, life in a religious community activates an appetite for acclaim or standing?
Oh, gosh, yes. That can happen a lot. The thing is, the way the monastic and the religious environment, particularly the Buddhist religious environment, the monastic environment works, is it's entirely engineered to reduce the ego. It's entirely built for that purpose, to reduce greed, hatred, and delusion. It's entirely geared towards that. That's its mechanism, that's its goal. However, deep down, that might not necessarily be what we want, right? And a lot of people discover that a lot of people, they come to monastic life basically to empower their ego, to make their ego secure and stronger and more invincible, right? They're not coming to let go, they're coming to build up that fortress, to make it stronger, to make it better, to make it more resilient. So in other words, they're going in the opposite direction to what monastic life is really for. That happens a lot. It's very, very common. The problem basically is it's the responsibility of the teacher, so to speak, to sometimes take that student aside and sort of say, this is what's happening, and to show how what's happening and particularly where it can lead to. Because certainly there's been lots of, Buddhism is 2,500 years old. There's been plenty of cases where people have made very dodgy claims, looked for status, looked for a career, looked for, One of the sad things about life, monastic life and the worldly life today is that it's become celebrated to look for allies, right? When you think, the agenda has become virtuous, being ambitious is good. That's the problem of today's world. And we look at it going, be an ally for our cause kind of thing. But when you stop and look at the word ally, you realize there's something really, really wrong there. Because what's the opposite of an ally? It's an enemy, isn't it? So to say, be an ally to the cause, so to speak, I'm inferring that if you're not, you're the enemy. And that's the big problem in the world today, is that's become almost virtuous to use this language, and particularly in a religious environment. It's bizarre. But it's rational in the sense of this is called cause and effect, but it's not beneficial. And so in a religious context, it happens. And it's kind of, we were talking about responsibility earlier, but this is what it all boils down to, is that if you have no internal integrity and internal check for yourself to say, hold on, what's going on here? You're lost. If your mindfulness doesn't develop, you could end up in all kinds of trouble. So it's the integrity of the practice which can, shall we say, in monastic life, it can be a bit more intense. Your defilements are a lot stronger because, you're spending a lot more time in solitude. You can't go off and open the fridge whenever you want to get a snack. You can't turn on the TV. You can't do this. You can't do that. All our little coping mechanisms aren't available to us. So we have to have that good foundation instead, that joy, that happiness, that peace in the meditation instead. Keeping, our integrity is very, very important. But that takes a lot of effort, and we have to be prepared to make that commitment. And that's up to us as individuals to do that. Not everybody's really willing to make that effort. They've got their other agendas with that. And ultimately, monastic life does make life so unpleasant for them that they do, by and large, eventually check out and leave. And that is very, very good. That's what's happened for 2,500 years. But it happens to pretty much all of us in a way, is that sense of confidence can be deceptive. We can start to get intellectual ideas and, this Dhamma makes sense. Hey, it's still intellectually it makes sense. In here it hasn't reached very deep yet. And we've kind of convinced ourselves, I understand what the Dhamma is. Maybe I'm a stream enterer. And we can create all these kinds of stories and then start believing them. So, very, very common problem. And it's part of the package. It happens. But it's up to all of us to keep sort of an internal mindfulness. Are we going astray? Are we being misled by our greed, hatred and delusion into a more harmful context? So, it's a bit of a tricky question, but it certainly happens. So, if you want more, please feel free to ask more.
We have a last question here in the chat too, Venerable, so I'll read that for you now. With our busy lifestyle, my meditation sessions seem to get shorter and shorter as my motivation to meditate is not so strong. Do you have any tips to help, Ajahn?
One of the ways that can be very, very helpful is to keep a meditation seat already set up. So if you have one in your room, you don't have to think about, I have to get my cushion, I have to set things up, because, that just seems too hard. When we're so busy, that can be an influence. Just this need to set things up and tidy things up can be, just too hard, I just want to have a nap instead. Having this stuff already set up in place can actually be really helpful. But a lot of it also comes down to, sometimes going on a meditation break and, basically not meditating at all for a couple of weeks and seeing inside, how does it feel? Do we feel drier and more miserable and more constrained? And, we can start to measure in that sense the difference between not having it versus the relaxation we can have in meditation. At the same time, it's the quality of meditation that matters as well. So if you're not getting any joy out of the meditation, any of the happiness, if it's still tight and tense, or you're trying too hard, or you're being told you have to practice this way and it's just not working for you, then try something else. It's okay, try something else. Try a metta meditation or, Chaganusati, or all these other practices. Chaganusati means recollecting your goodness, your generosity, feeling good about your life, the gratitude practices, everything else. Changing these things to give what you need in that moment is very, very helpful, because then the meditation seems relevant. It seems like, when you get up in the morning and you feel hungry for breakfast, meditation can feel like that. At the end of the day, you feel hungry for a nice relaxation on your meditation cushion. And that is really a helpful way of looking at it.
Thank you, Venerable. Venerable, would you like to offer us some words or a blessing to finish?
Yes, cool. I don't have any words. What to do? So, blessing it is. Nati me saranang anyang buddho me saranang warang ete na sacha waje na soti te hotu sabada. Nati me saranang anyang damo me saranang warang ete na sacha waje na soti te hotu sabada. Nati me saranang anyang sango me saranang warang ete na sacha waje na soti te hotu sabada.